Over the last fortnight, Theresa May has spent almost 8 hours in the House of Commons answering questions, trying to sell her deal to MPs with no success, seemingly. Indeed, as things stand, it looks like on the day of the big vote on December the 11th, she could lose by more than 100 votes on current figures. So a change in tactic by Downing Street to go out and sell this deal to every corner of the kingdom, to go over the heads of MPs, to the general public and to influential business organisations, some of whom will fear the consequences of there being no deal. In a way, it's like an American president, not something we normally see a Prime Minister doing. The trouble is, of course, that Theresa May, as we saw in the general election last year, isn't the greatest of campaigners. And already today she's come up against problems in the form of Boris Johnson, Donald Trump, and here in Northern Ireland, the Democratic Unionists. She finished meeting the politicians within the last hour, but she began the day in mid-Wales.
So we've got handmade bars with landscapes on the inside, so we promote Wales.
Theresa May began her UK-wide sales pitch for the Brexit deal at the Royal Welsh Winter Fair.
I genuinely believe this is a deal that does deliver on the Brexit vote, but it does it in a way that maintains those good trading relationships, which of course is good for the economy and good for jobs.
She told farmers they'll be better off outside the Common Agricultural Policy and assured businesses that the long-term declaration will mean Britain can strike new trade deals with other states. Yet Donald Trump has suggested, rather unhelpfully for her, that Britain has come off worst from the Brexit deal.
Sounds like a great deal for the EU, and I think we have to do this. I think we have to take a look at seriously whether or not the UK is allowed to trade, because, right now, if you look at the deal, they may not be able to trade with us.
Mrs May, who's due to meet Trump at the G20 summit later this week, hit back.
If you look at the political declaration, which sets out the future framework for our relationship with the European Union, it clearly identifies that we will have an independent trade policy and we will be able to do trade deals, to negotiate trade deals with countries around the rest of the world. And as regards the United States, we've already been talking to them about the sort of agreement that we could have in the future. We've got a working group set up, which is working very well, has met several times, continuing to work with the US on this.
Mrs May also tried to seize the initiative by backing what she famously refused in last year's general election, a head-to-head TV debate with Jeremy Corbyn. But Boris Johnson said such an encounter would be a false choice on Brexit. There's no point in having a debate with two people who voted Remain, he tweeted. Any debate must involve someone who believes in Brexit. This afternoon, the Prime Minister continued her sales patter with farmers, businessmen and students in Belfast.
I've been through this 18-month negotiation process with people at most of the stages, virtually every stage, saying you won't get a deal, you won't be able to achieve this, you won't be able to achieve that, you won't be able to achieve the final deal. Now I've got to the final deal, everybody's saying, well, OK, what's the next?
Downing Street stress that farming and manufacturing bodies in Northern Ireland have both backed the deal, including this firm which makes ventilation systems.
I think Mrs May has demonstrated remarkable resilience and fortitude, and in the face of ferocious opposition, she's doing an extremely good job. I think in terms of getting her plan through the Commons, probably it's going to be difficult, but I think eventually common sense will hopefully prevail and we'll get an agreement that will be in the best interests of everyone, and particularly in Northern Ireland's case.
But the Democratic Unionists said there was no point in the Prime Minister coming here. Might more money change things, though, similar to the extra billion the Treasury gave Northern Ireland last year to secure the DUP's backing on big Commons votes? Would you be willing to take a bribe from Mrs May, another £1 billion or two?
Well, of course, we didn't take a bribe in the first place. The confidence and supply agreement was for all of the people of Northern Ireland. Some of that money has already been delivered. We look forward to the rest of that money being delivered for all of the people of Northern Ireland.
So if they offered another £2 billion, say, or £3 billion?
It is quite offensive, actually, to raise this in terms of money. We're talking about the constitutional and economic long-term future of Northern Ireland, so the answer is no.
Whilst the withdrawal deal includes the Ireland backstop, Mrs Foster insists DUP MPs won't vote for it.
Michael Crick reporting. Well, the next stop on the Prime Minister's pre-Christmas sales tour is Scotland, where Mrs May is tomorrow expected to promise that her Brexit deal will strengthen the union. But she'll be following hot on the heels of the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, outlining why the draft Brexit deal will be damaging to Scotland. Our correspondent Kieran Jenkins is in Edinburgh. Kieran, what's Nicola Sturgeon been saying today?
Well, she hasn't been won over by Theresa May, that's for certain, as the PM's persuasion tour rolls into Scotland tomorrow. The First Minister's Scottish government saying that Theresa May's deal will cost every Scot £1,600 per year by 2030 and will make the case for independence even stronger. The SNP position is pretty clear now. The third biggest party in Westminster, remember, they will support whichever of two options can command a majority in the House of Commons, either a people's vote or a Norway plus Plan B Brexit. It's interesting, this Norway plus option, because it does seem to be gaining momentum in Westminster, including, if you believe reports among some cabinet members, very quietly of course. In a nutshell, Norway Plus, what it means, if you don't know, would be being out of the common agricultural and fisheries policies, but in the single market, plus a customs union and joining the European Free Trade Association, along with Iceland, Switzerland, Liechtenstein and Norway. Now clearly that would be way too much for any hard Brexit here. There would be heaps of opposition, but Nicola Sturgeon is now actively advocating for it, along with her preferred option, which is to abolish Brexit altogether, to which end, she says, put me in those TV debates.
The danger is a debate between Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn is simply a debate about two versions of Brexit that are only really different around the margins. So I think all voices and all options should be heard. And to Theresa May, I would simply say, what are you scared of?
And by the time of the TV debate, Nicola Sturgeon would really like to have struck a deal with Jeremy Corbyn. Her plan only works if Labour come on board, but she made it pretty clear to us today here at Bute House that Jeremy Corbyn is keeping her, along with the rest of us, guessing.
Thanks, Kieran. Well, one of the big concerns about a no-deal Brexit has been how it would affect the supply of medicines. Today, the government urged people not to start stockpiling their own medicines, as this could simply make any supply problems even worse. The Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, said that extensive planning for a no-deal had been undertaken by the NHS, and some of those plans could be put into effect before Christmas if needed.
The stockpiling is going to be done by pharmaceutical companies, and we will support them and are supporting them in doing that. It does not need to be done above the normal levels of supplies by NHS trusts or by individuals. And this is very important, because if too many people try to stockpile, then you end up with more demand for stockpiling, when what we need to do is stockpile within the pharmaceutical companies so that they can fulfil their contracts in the normal way.
Matt Hancock there. Well, I'll be speaking to representatives of the farming and business community here in mid-Wales late in the programme. But for now, back to London and John Snow in the studio. John.
Thank you, Matt. A little earlier, I was able to speak to Government Minister Robin Walker from the Department for Exiting the European Union. So I began by asking him why MPs should back this deal and if he's shocked by those that don't.
I think MPs should be backing this deal because it provides certainty. It gives us a trade deal outside the EU, which is better than the EU has offered to any other third country in the world, and it delivers on the referendum result, taking control of our laws, our borders and our money. So I do expect MPs, when they've had a look at the detail of this deal, to get behind it. But of course, there are a wide range of opinions in the House of Commons on these issues, and always have been. And those who speak loudest and perhaps get most of the airtime are those with the opinions at the extremes of this argument.
But a forest of MPs who are not on those extremes also rejected it.
I don't think that's the case. I mean, people have, of course, raised concerns and points for debate and discussion. I think it's right that we should have those.
Did you expect him?
I'm not going to get into discussing individuals and their positions. I think what is clear is that a number of people do have concerns, particularly about the backstop. But what we want to do is put in place a future relationship that ensures we can do that without the backstop. That, I think, is profoundly in the interests of both the UK and the EU.
Well, they, like us, will want to know what Plan B is.
I think what we're all focused on is the deal that has been negotiated. I think this is a deal that delivers on the referendum result. That's what we're focused on delivering, and of course that's the parliamentary task in the weeks ahead.
But with respect, you're talking to me as if yesterday didn't happen. There was a resounding total rejection of this deal.
Actually, that's not what I saw. Well, I think what was interesting about yesterday's debate is, yes, we had an hour of people from either side of the debate expressing their reservations and concerns. That was followed by 2 hours in which a number of MPs stood up and actually supported it.
Do you think your party can ever recover? After all, David Cameron called this referendum to resolve an insoluble split in the Tory party. And now your party is in pieces.
I think it's clear for a period of 30, 40 years, there's been a debate in every party about our relationship with the European Union. Of course, it split the Labour Party during the 1980s.
Nobody
the Conservative Party has always had a wide spectrum of opinion. I think we now have an opportunity to move forward to show that we are actually delivering on the key sovereignty asks of people who wanted to leave the EU.
Minister,
but we also
do so
in a way that protects our economy.
We don't seem to be talking about the same story. Yesterday was a disaster for the government, for the Tory party, and for the country. And you seem to be saying, don't worry, we can fix it, we're going to sort it.
I simply don't agree with that characterisation. I think what we've seen is a deal negotiated which actually delivers on many of the things we were always told would be impossible to deliver. This is a crucial step forward in the negotiations, and of course there is going to be political controversy, debate and heat and light around it.
You accept, do you, that we've moved beyond any question of a vote of no confidence? I mean, the Prime Minister is dead meat.
I completely disagree. I think we've heard repeated speculation about votes of no confidence, and what's been shown is that those people who've been driving that speculation haven't been able to deliver on what they've repeatedly promised that they would.
So we can look forward to at least another term of government from the Prime Minister. She'll win the next election, she'll stay the Tory leader. All that's in place.
I'm not in the business of making political projections. What I would say is that I think we have a Prime Minister who's shown enormous resilience, great courage in standing up to the EU in these negotiations, protecting crucial red lines for the UK, but also showing that she accepts there has to be a sensible compromise to get the right deal for our country. That's what we have in front of us now, and I think she's the right person to deliver that and to see it through.
Robin Walker, Brexit Minister, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.
Well, welcome back to the Cairbarris Manor Hotel in Builth, in the heart of mid-Wales. Now, this is, of course, the place where the Prime Minister came this morning at the beginning of her sales pitch around the country. She went to the Royal Welsh Winter Fair, where she met farmers and agricultural businesses. The local farmers' union leaders have backed her deal on Brexit. We'll hear from one of those farmers in a minute, as well as those who disagree on both sides of the Brexit debate. But we started the day just down the road at the Winter Fair. The Prime Minister was already off to Belfast, disappearing into leaden, sodden skies on the second leg of her frantic tour, selling her deal by selling herself to them, the voters, above the heads of her own fellow politicians. Convince them to put pressure on their MPs. That is her strategy. Had it worked?
We depend in Wales so much on the exports. So
would you put pressure on your local MP if, to vote with the Prime Minister?
I would put pressure on anybody who's got the votes to put pressure on to support the Prime Minister in this deal, because it's the best thing we're faced with. If we have a no deal, I think it could be catastrophic to farming.
But the MPs are famously not as obedient as this lot.
We were just talking about it, and if there was a no deal, the export in this country was going to just shut down completely.
Right. So you as a farmer are terrified of a no deal, is that right?
Well, at the moment I am, and I voted to come out of Brexit.
Really?
Yeah.
I think this is the best deal we can possibly get. I don't think EU will do anything else for us apart from what they've done.
What about another vote, another referendum?
I think the original referendum, people weren't told the truth, and they voted for what they thought was going to happen, not what did happen.
this part of Wales voted by almost 54% to leave. But the farming community relies on exports and subsidies, and we found plenty of people who now had second thoughts.
There's such a mess, and when you've gone out, it may as well have stayed in, wouldn't you?
Right, what do you think? Stay in?
Yeah, such a mess now, isn't it?
But you'd like another vote?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. But perhaps Theresa May's greatest selling point here is her own tenacity.
I told her she was doing a good job. Got a thankless job, but she's holding out and showing her nerve.
How does she compare to the blokes around her in her own party who are telling her to quit?
Well, she's probably got balls of steel.
It's all about the numbers. The Prime Minister may be able to shift them here, but will this translate into shifting them in Parliament in less than 2 weeks? Well, we've assembled a wonderful panel here in the hotel. We're going to introduce people one by one as I talk to them. Let me start with you, John Davis. You're the representative of the Welsh National Farmers Union. You met Theresa May this morning.
Yes, we did.
Right? Did she manage to convince you?
Well, we're backing the deal because there are only two options on the table, and the other option is a no deal, and that's totally unacceptable.
Why is that unacceptable?
Well, it would be complete disaster for rural Wales and Welsh farming.
Because of exports, because of subsidies?
Well, absolutely. For exports, the barriers would be up, and it would be incredibly difficult to survive with 50% tariff going into the best market in the world. So simply not an option.
So knowing the risks, why did so many of your members vote for Brexit 2 years ago?
Well, I think there were a lot of promises made, during that time. There was a lot of fantasies sold, and people believed them. It's harder to deliver than promise, though.
Amy Coleman's, you're an office manager at a local garage here. You did not meet the Prime Minister, if I'm right in thinking.
No, I did not.
Do you agree with her?
I find it very difficult to agree with someone that doesn't carry themselves with the most confidence. Every time Theresa May seems to speak or come across, she always seems to and ah about things that she's saying.
But she's very clear about this deal. I mean, she's saying this is existential stuff for the country.
But even then, when she's debating that in Parliament, every other sentence is and you can't have much confidence in someone that doesn't come across as very confident in themselves.
But you wanted Brexit, right?
Yes.
Do you still want Brexit?
I still believe in Brexit.
And would you rather we crashed out without a deal?
I don't think it's actually possible to crash out without the deal. The EU needs us just as much as we need them. I don't think we've approached it in the best way. We haven't approached it with great belief in Britain. So you can't go to someone if you're going like the ball's in their court, not yours,
OK. Reverend Brian Reardon, OK, I know that's you. So you've got your finger on the pulse, so you talk to your parishioners. You were in favour of Remain. Right?
Oh yes, and still am.
And do you think the community has shifted its mood at all?
I believe that most of my parishioners who were farmers would like to think again about what they did 2 years ago.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, I think they are. They're a bit concerned with what we have is what we've got, whereas when we leave, if that's what's going to happen, whether we have a deal or no deal, it's going to be very, very difficult to know exactly where we're going to be then in terms of prices and grants and whatever else.
And I think when we spoke earlier, you said you would like to see a second vote. Is that the case?
I would love to see a second vote. I see it the only way forward. Everybody's talking about what's democratic. What is democratic is what the people want. The people were informed on certain things 2 years ago which have not materialised. It was a duff vote. And so I believe we should let people know again and let them have another shot at what they want to do. Shall we stay where we are? Yes, let's stay where we are because we're sure that they want us to stay and we are convinced, I'm sure, that that's what we'll get, a good deal.
OK, you're nodding, Elvin Warren. You're the leader of Plaid Cymru in the local council.
Yes, indeed. Yes,
you want a second vote? Are you sure?
It definitely makes sense because at the end of the day, it's not going to pass through the House of Commons. If you get Sir Michael Fallon even today, hardly a revolutionary talking in terms that he won't be supporting, it isn't going to go through. The only option, therefore, is to have a voice of the people, a democratic vote and a second referendum.
You used to farm yourself. We know that farming is all about the certainty of the future because you've got all these massive investments to make. So what do you say to John Davis? Address him directly. What would you say to John about this?
I well understand where the farming unions are coming from because they see this at this moment in time as being the only option. But in reality, it is not going to be passed through the House of Commons, and therefore we have to look beyond that. Where do we go from here? And a people's referendum is the only tool, a mechanism that moves the agenda forward and enables a wider discussion and get things to where we want.
John Davis, your response?
Well, obviously, these are the two options on the table at the present time. In 2 weeks' time, we'll know. If that's rejected, we'll reassess our options.
Yeah, but if you just give another referendum, so surely that's against democracy. You can't just say, oh, if you don't like an opinion or if something gets a little difficult, you'll just go back and redo it again.
The only other
that could be a never-ending.
I just want to hear what Frank Wilson, you're an entrepreneur, you're a businessman. You're the owner of this
I'd like
hotel.
to think so.
All right.
I'm the manager, actually, not
the manager. OK, fair enough. Yeah. One day, you never...
Well, we've had the vote, and the will of the people was to leave. And I think that everyone should back Theresa May. I mean, because I don't think we've been misled by her. I think we've been misled by the people that we were listening to at the time of the vote. But the vote is the vote, and I think we should back her.
Reverend, you're a man of wisdom and compromise. Isn't this vote, whether you like it or not, this is the only possible way of uniting the country that is so bitterly divided, this deal?
Let's look at it from the beginning. David Cameron took this to the people and he expected a yes. It didn't happen. It didn't take place. He then resigned, and we have Theresa May now, who is doing a good job, but Europe is dictating to her what is acceptable. There are so many things to look at. The backstop in Northern Ireland. There's the problem.
So you think this deal is turning us into a vassal state, as some on the Brexit side?
Well, we've got to think about the people in Northern Ireland. We've got to think about the backstop. What's going to happen there? It's all very well to say these things will be discussed at a later date, but what does a later date mean?
But we also need to think what's best for Wales, because at the end of the day, we are in Wales today, and the reality is we get 680 million a year from Europe at the moment. Where does that come from in the future? We're heavily dependent on the single market. And the other thing that's happening is a power grab from Westminster, from Cardiff. And those are all key questions we need to be challenging.
Amy, do you think that a better deal might actually be on offer and that Theresa May is just not trying hard enough to get it?
Yeah, to be blunt, I think there could be a better deal. I think there could be a better deal. The instant that we went into Brexit...
But she's tried for 2 years, we've been negotiating.
But the instant she went in like shy and like we're not in a position to assert ourselves, or like we don't have anything to offer. She didn't go in going, we're Britain and we can provide for ourselves and you need us as much as we need you. If you can't assert yourself as being value, then how can you expect them to see you as value?
But, the thing that I've heard over and over again today from the farmers down at the fair is that she's got stamina and resilience. She's walking around with daggers in her back and her front, and she's still walking and she's still selling.
She has shown fantastic tenacity, in all fairness to her, and resilience, hasn't she? If anybody thinks there is a better deal to be had in the next 120, 130 days, simply living in Cloud Cuckoo. This is the deal. There is no more to come from it.
Frank, when you look at the way that her own party has treated her, right, the constant threat of rebellion, the real attempt at rebellion that has fizzled, what does that make you think?
Well, I'm just disgusted at them, the way they've stabbed her in the back. I mean, she should have been supported more by her own colleagues, and it just become a joke now.
Does that make you value her more?
Absolutely.
Why?
Yeah. Well, because she's standing there and she's going, no matter what happens, I'm going to go through with this deal. And I think that we should be backing her. Even whether it's the right deal, the wrong deal, the woman spent her whole premiership looking for the best deal for us, and this is what she's brought.
Shouldn't you reward that, Reverend?
The country's seen 2 Brexit negotiators resign. We've seen many in her party who are opposed to her. We have the Labour Party who are, wherever they are, but probably opposed. The votes don't tie up. It's not going to work.
But do you really think that from the pulpit, apart from anywhere else, you can heal the divisions of this country if we were to have a second referendum?
I think so. I believe so.
Well, that's the only course of action, because it isn't going to go through the House of Commons. Labour in a mess. Corbyn is like camembert, melts under the heat of it all. And therefore, a second referendum, people's referendum, is the only way forward.
Would you like to see Jeremy Corbyn be much clearer about what he wants in terms of a second referendum?
He will never be clear. He hasn't been. We know what his line was in the 80s, and that's part of the dilemma Labour faces. They are equally as much as a mess as the Conservatives are, and we would none the wiser with a general election.
I think all the politicians are in a mess at the moment, to be honest. It's all a little bit everywhere.
You're young, Amy. You're just starting in your you started your professional life, but you've got a lot to look forward to. Are you worried about the future, of your own job and this country when you look at the political shenanigans at the moment?
I worry at the amount of doubt people have in Britain. That's concerning.
Doubt in Britain?
Yeah, there's a lot of doubt in Britain. The instant there was a leave or stay in the EU, it's like no one believes in us as a country. We weren't always a part of the EU. We don't necessarily always have to be a part of the EU. We can function outside. We don't have to have nothing to do with them. It's not, you know, it's not like there's a big old line in the sand. There's a lot of grey area. So it doesn't need to be so cutthroat. You know?
I hate to end on grey areas, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to end it. It's been absolutely fascinating speaking to all of you. I won't thank you all by name because we've run out of time. Thank you very much for coming here.